Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? Did you notice anything different? I have a red hat on, but what else? I shaved. How about that? But don't worry, I just wanted to shave once. I'm going to grow it all back. I don't like shaving. That's why I have a some growth on my face usually. Well, let's get on with it. First thing I want to say is thanks for watching, even those that watch it when it's not live. I can tell you that we're getting a lot of reach on these. We're connecting with a lot of people on these. So even if you don't watch it live, watch it later. Tonight I'm going to talk about the economy. And let me just say, the economy is a very, very, very complicated thing. The United States economy is very large, as you know, and it's very complicated. And what I'm going to try to accomplish tonight is to provide some useful information for everybody. So that when you hear these numbers on the news or you read about them or someone says something to you, it'll give you some context as to what those numbers mean. And so the first thing is GDP, gross domestic product. What is that? What does GDP mean? Well, it's the totality of all the goods and services produced in the United States. And right now the GDP is about $24 trillion thereabouts. And we pay attention to, how much growth there is in the GDP each year. And why is that important? Well, growth indicates that we don't want it because of inflation, but if the economy is vibrant, businesses are growing, new businesses are starting, people are buying more things and spending more money. It creates more opportunity. More opportunity for new businesses to start, for existing businesses to grow, and it increases our standard of living. So it's important that the GDP grows. And let me give you an example. I've got some charts up here. So the GDP in 2000, the year 2000, so 22 years ago, was $13.2 trillion. So now it's 24 trillion. So you see how much the economy has grown in the last 22 years, quite a bit. Now, the growth rate is important because let me just tell you about this thing called the rule of 72. And what that means, if you divide the growth rate into 72, that's how many years it will take for the economy to double. So if you have a consistent 2% growth rate, divided into 72, that's 36 years. Now, this is what's amazing. If you have a 3% growth rate divided into 72, what's that turn out to be? It's like 24 years. So it makes a huge, huge difference. And, and the other part of that is the bigger the growth rate means what? Means that there's more revenue to the government. The bigger the GDP is, the more revenue to the government. So just to give you an example, in 2000, year 2000, the revenue to the government, the federal government that is, was about $2 trillion. All right. And that was with about a $13 trillion GDP. Well, in 2021, the revenue to the federal government was about $4 trillion, and the GDP was about $24 trillion. So the growth of the GDP is very, very important. Now, so what's happening now? You've probably heard in the last several months that we might be in a recession, and the reason people are talking about that is for the last 2 months the GDP has actually been negative. That means the economy is contracting, and it was in the second quarter 1.6 negative, and I think the first quarter 1.6 negative. The second quarter was about 0.6 negative. So the economy's been contracting, and that's why people are saying, "Oh, is there a recession coming?" And we'll find out the third quarter, which ends at the end of September, what the GDP number is in late October, which is going to be extremely important for this election. Now, the estimates, they just reduced the estimate. The estimate was that the GDP for the third quarter would be 0.5%. Hi, Mike Biendo, how you doing? And they just reduced that estimate to 0.3%, which is not much growth. But it will be a significant impact on the election, this third quarter GDP number. And if it's positive, of course, the Democrats will say that the economy is turning around, going from negative GDP growth to positive. So be on the lookout for that. Now, having said all that, we are in this situation where interest rates are going up. You heard just the other day that the Fed is increasing interest rates by another 75 basis points, which is 0.75%. And I think that's their third 75 basis point increase. And as I talked about Tuesday night, the reason the Fed is doing that is to try to get inflation under control. Because as I talked Tuesday night, I don't want to get into the inflation discussion again, but inflation is horrifically bad for everybody and the economy. So the problem with increasing the interest rates is, yes, it'll tap. We hope it'll tap down inflation, but the whole idea of that is to slow down the economy. So we're in a situation where GDP growth is negative at a time when the Federal Reserve is increasing interest rates to try to demand destruction, as they call it, to tap down the economy, which will result in less GDP growth. So, we are in a perilous time economically, and it's likely to get much, much worse. And you ought to think about that with this election coming up. So the other thing that's going on is we have low unemployment numbers. I mean, it's like 3.6%. That's really, really low. And having said that, we have 11 million job openings, and I think there's like 6 million people looking for work. So there's this out of whack with employment, which tends to run counter to this whole idea that the economy is contracting. A lot of that, I think, has to do with coming out of the pandemic. So that's going on, and so we've got this unemployment situation. Now, you may have been hearing a lot of the big companies are laying people off because the economy is contracting, and that'll go to push up unemployment. However, with the job openings, maybe those people will go take the jobs that a lot of small businesses can't fill. I mean, here in Wolfboro, even, I go to places and there's signs up, I'm sure you've seen them, by these small businesses apologizing for lack of service because they can't get employees. So the the economy is not in great shape. With the increase in interest rates, it's going to adversely affect the economy, and then we have the deficit adding to the debt, and we now know the debt is about $30 trillion, and think about this, with a $30 trillion debt, and it's going up big time. And I put in a post with the estimated deficits, which will add to the debt, they're over $1 trillion for the next several years. So, but think about this, with a $30 trillion debt, if interest rates go up 1%, that the government's got to pay an additional 1% on that debt, that's $300 billion. It's a lot of money. Now let me put it in context for you, and this is interesting. And the total budget of the government, pre-COVID. I'm going to go to pre-COVID. So 2019 was $4.4 trillion. $4.4 trillion. So, and that number, I don't know what the total interest amount was, but interest rates were really, really low. So it might have only been 300 billion on, at that time, I think it was like $25 trillion in debt. But at $30 trillion in debt, when the government was spending $4.4 trillion, and you add 300 billion to that, that's a huge part of what the federal government spends. And if interest rates keep going up at $30 trillion, if it's 4% at $30 trillion, that's 1.2 trillion in debt alone on a 219 federal budget of $4.4 trillion. Now, all right, that was 2019. And here's the thing, right, about government spending is pre-COVID, it was 4.4 trillion. All right. And we know we spent a bunch of money when COVID hit in 2020. It went up to $6.5 trillion that the government was spending for a $3 trillion added to the debt. And then in 2021, it was $6.8 trillion. Now, it was the year that, if you remember, Biden was president, and he did I think it was 1 point something trillion COVID relief that everyone thought wasn't necessary, plus the infrastructure, and the deficit that year was 2.7 trillion. So we went, and then the estimate this year is 5.8 trillion. And if you look at the estimates that I put in that post in out years, it's 5.8 trillion, 6 trillion, 6.4 trillion, 6.7 trillion. The point of this is, the federal government has an insatiable appetite to spend money. And because we jumped up in the COVID area, those numbers are staying pretty high. And that just continues to add each year a deficit, which adds to the debt, and we're looking at over $1 trillion deficits for the years to come, and it's a dangerous situation, very, very dangerous. And sadly, if you go back in time, and when the government, for example, in 2000, I'm just picking a year, 2006 was spending 2.6 trillion. I mean, if we could get the federal government spending under control, with the revenues going up to 4.5 trillion and even hitting 5 trillion in 2025, we can actually start reducing the debt. But the federal government just does not have the discipline to get spending under control. Again, that's why this election is really, really important. The other thing that we see going on with federal government is more and more and more regulation, and that regulation makes it difficult for new businesses to start, for small businesses to operate, and even for medium and large size businesses to operate. I mean, I did some research, and the average small business is paying about $10,000 per employee per year to comply with the federal government regulations. $10,000 per employee per year. If you have a manufacturing business, it doubles to about $20,000 per employee per year to comply with federal government regulation. And that will add to a contraction of the GDP growth. That will be a damper on GDP growth. Less businesses will start. Businesses won't grow because of the burdensome government regulation. Again, think about that with this election coming up. And we now know, you add to that this bill they passed where they're going to hire 87,000 new IRS agents, and those agents are not being hired just to go after rich people and big companies. I mean, that's what the IRS is doing now. They're auditing rich people and big companies. They're coming after, they're going to audit small businesses, the small businesses that are barely making it, some of which they might do some cash business and they don't declare the income. The IRS is coming after those folks. Now, it'll take many years for the IRS to hire that many people, train that many people. So that it'll be some time before we start seeing that. And maybe before all that gets done, the policy will change. But that's an added burden, to business to deal with, now spending money to make sure your books are in shape. And, in my law business, we represented a lot of small businesses, and of course we would counsel them that, you got to keep, your books straight. You got to pay your taxes. You got to comply with regulations. And many, many, many times small business owners would say, I just can't afford to do that. And that's the reality of small businesses. Some do, but some don't, and the IRS is coming after them. And that will dampen growth in this country. So this election is very, very important, and we have to get inflation under control, as I talked about on Tuesday, and that's what the rise in interest rates is doing. We hope it will do. I mean, the problem is you got the monetary policy trying to dampen down inflation, but then you have the federal government spending all this money, which adds to inflation. So they're working at cross purposes. And so this may linger for a long time. And that won't be good for this, being the inflation may linger for a long time. And it'll also hurt growth. So we could be looking at some tough economic times in the coming years. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it gets solved, but but I think it is a bit of the reality of the situation that we're faced with. And it's the other thing is increases in taxes dampen business growth as well. So we've got these forces going on. We got the Fed doing stuff to slow the economy to get inflation under control, the Federal Reserve, that is, and we have fiscal policy, the federal government spending money that is adding to the inflation. One of the things I heard today on the Business Channel was um, there's still a lot of money out there from all the government giveaways, that people have a lot of money that they have saved, and that's why the consumer spending still pretty high, which in fact will add to inflation. The other thing that's going on with the increase in interest rates, which will hurt the economy and hopefully get inflation under control, but it will reduce growth, is the housing market. The housing market is now facing some significant problems and will continue to, because with the increase in these interest rates, a 30-year mortgage, the average 30-year mortgage is now above 3%. And a year ago, it was now above 6%. I'm sorry. The average 30-year mortgage is now above 6%. A year ago, it was less than 3%. So that's for your first-time home buyer or for the middle class. That additional interest adds a tremendous amount of money to your monthly mortgage payment. So that's another problem we're going to be facing. Yeah, we know, and those of us who have 401ks and money in the stock market, we know that I think year to date the market is down 15%, and that impacts us all, and it impacts us all psychologically, and we spend less. So I think tough economic times right now, and I think the solution to this is got to get inflation under control. The Federal Reserve is doing its part, but the federal government has got to stop the spending, and the federal government has got to get out of the way of business. And with the Democrats in control in D.C., that's not likely to happen. They cannot raise taxes. They are raising taxes. All that dampens business activity, and part of the inflation problem is, the supply of goods and services is down when the demand is up, and that pushes prices up. So I think the federal government needs to get out of the way, cut back this regulation, unleash the American oil and gas industry, and keep taxes low, which they're not doing any of those things, which is why there a lot of folks aren't optimistic. I don't. The CEOs of the big banks was testifying this week in front of Congress, and yesterday, Jamie Dimon, CPA of J.P. Morgan Chase, biggest bank in the world, Rashida Tlaib, asked him if he would stop lending to oil and gas companies, and Jamie Dimon said, absolutely not. If we did that, he said something to the effect as you'd knock the hell out of the American economy. So I'm going to do one of these Facebook lives on climate change and what it means, and I don't want to get into it now, but I kind of think a good solution that will help climate and 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 just to be clear, man-made climate change, anthropogenic climate change is the technical term for it. I do not believe is much of a contributor, if at all. But one solution to all this is, you know, if we manufacture goods in this country, we will do it in a way that is less impactful on the climate than what the Chinese do when they manufacture goods in China. They don't care about the impact on the climate. So, in fact, I mean, currently there's like 300 coal-fired electric generating plants being built in China right now, adding to their already 1,000. So they don't care about the climate. So if we brought more manufacturing here, unleashed the oil and gas industry, and actually manufacture things in the country, we would do it in a way that is much less impactful on the climate than what is occurring in China or India and other places. And I think that's part of the solution. And it's a elegant solution to many other problems as well. But I'll get into that in a separate Facebook Live. Well, listen, everybody, thanks for listening. I'm coming up on a half hour. I like to keep these things at a half hour. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in, and I'll do my best to answer them, or email me or call me. But just be prepared for this. The economic troubles we're facing. What you're spending. Be frugal, and be prepared for what could be even more troubling economic times. And think about all this when you vote in the election. And I think some of you are already voting with the early voting. At any rate, have a great evening. I'm going to watch the football game. I think the Steelers and the Browns are on tonight, and I'm going to go watch that. And thank you so much for listening in. And this is Corky Messner, and I'll be back next week. Thank you.